We should call the film The Warp and the Weft of It All. As you weave, you have the warp and then you have the weft. And everything has woven together in just an amazing way. And it's not finished. That's what excites me. And unless, if the Lord comes tomorrow, I'll be happy for him to come. I'm ready. When I think about it, I'm amazed at what he's done with me and for me through the years. I'm Mariana McGinty Long. I was born in Lubbock, Texas, January 6, 1938. I knew all of my grandparents, and in fact, I knew all of them until after I was married. So they lived a good long while. They all celebrated 50 years of marriage, both sides of my grandparents, and my parents did also. So that's a great heritage. The McGintys, I know them more about a lot of their people because of the exciting history they have. My uncle was a world champion bulldogger for 2 years, and his name is in the Cowboy Hall of Fame. So he has quite a history. He started the what's now the Rodeo Association. It was called the Turtle Club then because they did all their business out of the turtle of a car, out of the trunk of a car. And now it is the Rodeo Association. But he was quite the rodeo man. The McGintys were ranchers, except for my dad. He broke away. There were 6 boys in that family, and he's the only farmer, but he moved where my mother was, and he was a farmer, and of course the farmers and the ranchers sometimes, but no, they had a great time together. But my dad was a dryland farmer. He married a draper, and so the Drapers and McGintys always have been close, but my mother's sister, Monty, also married a McGinty. So all of our kids, we're double cousins. And we grew up thinking we were brothers and sisters. So my grandfather McGinty was born in Goliad, I believe, Goliad. And he was the restless soul, I think. And so he started moving to West Texas. And they were in post for a while. He was actually the first constable in that county. And so his name, Mariana McGinty, is on the historical plaque in front of the courthouse there as the first constable. And then he started wanting to move. At that point in time, they were living in the dugouts. And they started moving west. And when they got to Plains, Texas, my grandmother said, "This is it. I'm going no farther." But I remember him telling me about befriending Indians in that part of the world. So that's kind of an interesting thing to me, that he and an Indian became friends because he would take food to them. My daddy was one of 6 boys. They were all big men for their generation. We lived in Tahoka, and my dad would have to go to Amarillo to buy clothes long enough for him, which kind of explains my kids being 6 foot, 6'4", and 6'9", and my 2 grandsons being 6, 7, and 8. So I always wanted to be small, and God made it so that I feel small when I'm with them, and I love it. I feel very well protected.
Mom, did she share anything about her being a girl growing up? Where'd she grow up?
She was the middle of 9 children, so she felt responsible for the older ones and the younger ones both. And I always do my fingers like this because she was the thumb in all these other kids. But she was kind of the hub of the wheel, and lived longer than any. She outlived them all. She died at 93. Was a sweet, sweet woman. I wish I had asked her more questions. There's so many things that I wonder. I wonder about her giving birth to these twin girls. And the only thing I know about it is that my dad said, when we asked him, he said, I had to choose between letting my wife live or saving my 2 infant daughters. And he said, I had to choose for the mother of my one daughter that I had. So he said that was the darkest day of my life, to have to choose that. But my mother was near death, and so they had to work with her and had to set the twins aside. This day and age, that wouldn't happen. But that was in 36, 7, about 37, I think. And when she was expecting our younger sister, I was 8 years old when she was born, she didn't tell us she was pregnant. We didn't use that word pregnant. That was just not done. And so we did not know that she was going to bring home a baby from the hospital. I didn't. My older sister knew, but I was only 8 years old, so how would I know? My goodness. My mother was the old maid school teacher out at Wells, Texas, and my daddy and his brother were the bachelors in that area. And my mother dated Oscar McGinty for a while, but my mother, as she was in a play or something at the school, she reached over and touched the knee of Patty McConnell or somebody McConnell. I remember his. Anyway, she reached over and touched his knee, and Oscar said that was just being too familiar, and I'm not going to date her anymore. And so my daddy said, "Are you sure that you are not dating her anymore?" And he said, "Absolutely." He said, "Okay, then I'm going to ask her out." And so they married June 7 or so. Yeah, June 7.
What was your dad doing before?
He was farming.
He was just farming.
He had a farm, a small farm, and he farmed with a mule and a plow. And my mother loved telling after they were married, said it was in the winter, she had on a flannel gown, and he bit her back in the middle of the night. And he was dreaming that he was trying to get his mule to do something, and that's how you bit a mule's ear to get them to be obedient. And that's what he thought, he was biting the mule's ear. And so we lived 10 miles. There's about 7 miles on a pavement, and then you got off on a dirt road, and then you got off on a turn road to get to our house. So we lived quite a ways out. It was just 4 rooms. We had a cistern for our drinking water. I mean, you think about it, and I'm still alive. But that water hit the roof where probably birds pooped and all kinds of things happened. We did not have electricity. We had a kerosene lamp. And
you grew up in the Wild West.
I did. Grew up in the Wild West. We had a crank phone. Ours was a 2 longs and a short, I think. That was when it rang 2 longs and a short. Ring, ring, ring. That was so we'd pick it up. But all of our neighbors could pick it up too. If they wanted to know what's going on in somebody's life, they just listened to all the conversations. We eventually got REA, Rural Electric Association. It was my job. We had kerosene lamps, and it was my job to clean the chimneys, get the soot out of it. And I lost my job because suddenly we had electricity coming into the house. I was aware that Mother was very... she never did hoard things, but she didn't throw away string. There were a lot of things that she kept that I know now why she kept it. I remember while I was growing up, the beginning of World War II, that we saved aluminum foil, and we turned that in, and they used it. It was a government thing. So those were We did not have an indoor bathroom. We had we were uptown, though. We had a 2-holer toilet, so you could take a friend out with you. And that was, our bathtub was a number 2 tub, and whoever was the cleanest got to bathe first, usually just once a week. And Daddy was always last because he was the dirtiest. But those were memories. The one memory that I really, really remember, and I couldn't have been more than probably 3, we had a slop bucket it's a crock pot that sat in the middle of the kitchen. And so all of our scraps would go into that, and then we'd take them out and feed them to the hogs or the chickens. And so I was learning to do, I think, yo-yo. I don't know why, but I remember doing something with my hands, and I was backing up, and it caught me right at my knees, and I fell right down into the slop bucket and couldn't get out. But I remember biscuits and gravy and milk and squirting out around me and being totally unable to get myself out of it. So here again, It was the beginning of my life of being awkward. Usually I remember being Saturday. I don't know why, because I was not in school at the time. But we had 2 rows of where the chickens would roost, and so there was always a lot of poop under those. And so I would scrape all that over here and this pile and this over here, and I'd get it all together and I'd get it all cleaned up, and it would be so nice. So I did that. I did all that one Saturday, and the chicken house faced the west, and we had a storm come in that day from the west, and it blew the chicken house over. And I just remember being so angry because I had spent all that time getting the chicken house clean, and the wind blew the chicken house over, and it could have been cleaned out by the wind all that time. So anyway, that's one of my favorite memories too. You had to walk to the main road down the turn row, and from our house, and so we'd go down there, and it was during the war, and there were no men in that area to hire for school bus drivers, and so the high school boys were driving the buses, and Glenn Ross Evans was driving the bus. I think that was who it was, but I was getting ready to get on, and he started the bus up, and I fell under between the front wheel and the back wheel, but he stopped before the back wheel ran over me. But that's when my folks said, let's think about moving closer to town.
So Mom stayed at home with you, and Pat is your older sister,
Mhm.
and then Monty is the younger one. And you moved when Monty was born?
She was born. We were in our new house in
Okay.
Tahoka. It was outside the city limits of Tahoka, but it was right there close by. We lived about 2 blocks from the school, and of course we had to walk, but we could cut across the pasture across there to get to the school. Now that's all built up. It was a really thriving town because we moved there in 1945, right after the war, and all the little shops around the square were filled. And I worked in every one of the stores there. I mean, I either wrapped Christmas gifts, or I worked behind I worked at the drugstore. I worked at all those little shops. I wanted to. My older sister never did work. She didn't, and that was just her choice. And that was, no, I worked because I wanted to.
Tell me about the grub situation.
Well, we ate 3 times a day and around the table. No TV. Well, they got a TV after I graduated from high school, so.
Did you go to church when you were little?
Absolutely. I didn't even know that you couldn't go. And you just went. Every time there was something to go to, we were there and loved it.
Do you remember the name of it?
Oh, the Church of Christ in Tahoka, yeah. And my grandparents were always there. All my cousins were there. I mean, we had a slew of cousins. We grew up enjoying each other all the time. That was just part of that was one of our favorite times of the week. My mother and dad actually lived across when they built the new church building in Tahoka. The property was just across the street from my mother and dad, so that was handy. But every Sunday we went to a different part of town, which was not far. Tahoka's not that big, but we would pick up the people that didn't. We picked up a family, the Richards, that had no vehicle. So that was part of our Sunday morning. Go get the Richards, come back for Bible study and for class.
What was the dating scene like?
Well, there weren't many.
Or the social scene?
Yeah, the social scene at the church was all my cousins, so there was no dating. Oh, goodness. I remember my little Bible class teacher, Bessie Rainey, and Clovis McElroy, Clovis Stevens. And I remember them teaching me, for God so loved the world, He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life. And we would go over that, and those so many things that they taught me come back to me often. And it was a little bitty class. I remember the little chairs we had, and there's probably about 4 of us in there. But that was an important part of my life. My mother's and daddy's philosophy was, when they wanted to go to some place during the school year, they would write a letter to the school and they'll say, our kids are going to learn more on the road than they will in class. And so we did make some trips that were unusual. When I was 10, I believe, we went to Yellowstone, and that was with my double cousins, the other McGinty's. And the 2 dads rigged up the back of the pickup with like a covered wagon. put a canvas over it, and they put the slats like out of a bed. You may not know what those are anymore. The slats, and then put a springs on that, and then a mattress from on the top. So you had all this space beneath here. They did that from the sideboards. And so some of us slept under the mattress, some of us slept on the mattress, and then we had a car. The other McGinty's had a new Chrysler that was a fine car, and some of them slept in the car. But we went to Yellowstone and saw all the things that you see at Yellowstone, and camped out and went through the Black Hills of South Dakota. That was one trip. We got on the train one time, because back then you paid for your car a certain price, and then you paid the transport fee, which was separate. So my dad said, we can go up there and pick it up and drive it back for the same price. Let's do it. So we got on the train, all of us, the 5 of us, and we went on the train up to Lansing, Michigan, got in the car, off of the assembly line. It was a maroon Olds 88. There may be another name in there somewhere, I think. But it was a beautiful car, brand new. I mean, just literally off of the assembly line. And we got to watch them build them. We went in the plant. And then we drove from there across to Niagara Falls. We drove across the part of Canada and to Niagara Falls, and then back home through Kentucky and the Calumet Horse Farm, things that I'll always remember.
And I'm wondering if you, as a 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13-year-old girl, your parents doing this, they kind of stamped in your brain this satisfying the curiosity of what's out there.
What's out there, absolutely. And I had no idea it was, but I know it was. I remember hanging clothes out on the line and watching airplanes go over. And sometime the shadow I would be in the shadow of the airplane. Excuse me. And I think someday I'm gonna do that someday. And when I was a senior in after my freshman year in college is my first flight, and I flew from Lubbock up to New York City all by myself at 17. Got off the plane, took a subway into the city, took a subway out to New Jersey, and stayed there till I took a subway out to the camp where I worked for a Life and Times camp. People from all over the world were counselors, and here I was, a little Texas girl. But it was an amazing adventure.
What was the dynamics like of mom and dad? Was when your father gets home, like, tell me about how they raised you.
Of course, my dad worked almost all day long out. We used to say he comes home at dark 30, because that's how long he worked. But they worked together well. There was not a lot of discussion about things. Everybody just kind of knew what they were supposed to do and how they were supposed to do it. And I had such respect for my dad and mother, but especially my dad, that I think that kept me out of trouble more than anything. I never wanted to disappoint him or embarrass my family. And that to me was how they put that in me, I don't know, but that was really important to me.
Tell me about school.
I liked school. Remember my first grade teacher, Mrs. Roberts. Well, I remember all my teachers, but I just remember her especially. I liked school, yeah. Of course, I love the social part of it. And then, of course, I liked playing baseball at recess and the things that, yeah.
Your mom was an educator. Were they on you, or were you kind of on your own?
Pretty much on my own. I didn't know I could not do homework. You just did your homework. There was no question. It was just, you just did it. Yeah.
Part of life.
Yeah.
Did you have like a pack of kids you'd hang with?
I was not allowed to hang. In fact, when I'd ask Mother, can I go down to the drugstore? She'd say, well, we've got Coca-Cola in here in the refrigerator. And I'd say, well, I just want to see who's there, and she'd say, well, get on the phone. They'll tell you who's there. I mean, for some reason, she didn't like me doing that. And so I guess they were protecting me. But I had my group of friends, but more in high school and at school. We had our little groups there, yeah. And we still get together. We still talk to each other every now and then. Of course, we've gone way over our 60th year of reunions now, but I was in the band. That was really important to me. I started my band career when I was in 6th grade. I rented a French horn, and I was good. I was good. I think because I play by ear and I have a musical thing by ear, it was very important in French horn when you can see the notes, but if you don't hear those notes, if you don't know where to go with them, I think it's really difficult. And so I felt really good about my French horn playing. But I also learned to play the cornet and all the brass instruments, and I enjoyed playing the drums. I got to do that quite a bit.
Did you play piano already?
I played the piano when I was 3, yeah.
Do you have a piano
Scared
at
my
home?
mother. When we were out in the country, somehow we had an upright piano in the living room. I mean, we just had 4 rooms, but that's about all that was in that room, I remember. But she was in the kitchen, and she heard somebody playing a tune, and she thought somebody had gotten in the house with her. Yeah, but I never did learn. I mean, I can read music. I don't like music. It's too restricting, sheet music. But I enjoy coming into my piano at night, and that's kind of my time with the Lord and playing things that I can communicate with Him. I really love that time. I took some music, but my teacher would hit my hand when I would miss a key. So what I would do, I would take my book home and get my sister, Pat. She read music real well. She would play it, and then I could hear it, and then I could play it without having to mess with the music. So that's how I got by with that. But I did not develop great musical skills like some of my cousins have. I'll put it that way. I was selected as drum major when I was a freshman, and so I got to do that all the way through. My first experience in October, our band was selected to go to the Cotton Bowl in Dallas. And so our band had won something. We were really good. We were a new band, but we were good. So when they put us all out on the field, it was all these bands from all the areas. Our band was right in the middle, right in the beginning of it, and these other bands were up to the side. And guess who was the drum major to lead all that out? Scared me to death. I was not even used to being a drum major, and all of a sudden I had to blow the whistle and twirl the thing and get us all started on that field. And it was a scary thing, but broke me in good after that. Yeah. I guess my folks gave me confidence. I think my mother used to tell me, I think she was just lying a lot, but she used to say, Mariana, you can do anything you want to do if you want to do it bad enough. And
Right.
she convinced me that I could about nearly everything I ever did. So I guess when I got out there on that field, I felt like I was the boss and I could tell these kids what to do, and I enjoyed it. I actually kind of cheated myself. I graduated in 3 years instead of 4. All I had to do was take an English course by correspondence. I'd covered everything else, and my grades were good, and I wanted to get to ACC. It was a college that started for the Churches of Christ, and basically it was almost 100% students that were from Churches of Christ. That has changed in the last years, but it was just a group of people that wanted a place where kids felt safe and where they could study the Bible, where they could study it at a different level from just reading in Bible school and on Sunday mornings. I had a gift, I guess, for art. I did not know what I wanted to do with it. I had never had art classes except when I was 12 years old for a week, I think. And I knew that at ACC I could take art, and it had a nice art department. I thought that, and I thought home economics because that was a big thing. And I thought maybe I could combine art and home economics and be an interior decorator. That sounded very exciting.
Sophisticated.
Sophisticated, that's it. And so I probably didn't even know the word interior decorator, but I learned it. But I then I got here and decided that home economics was maybe not my thing because it was kind of like playing the piano. I cooked by ear, and when they made me follow recipes, I didn't especially like that. I have learned since that that's a good idea to follow a recipe. So anyway, I came here, roomed with Barbara Camp. She was Barbara Flint at the time, and just had a great time. My freshman English teacher was Mrs. Pack. We called them Sister Pack, and her husband was Brother Pack. It was not a doctor and a doctor, and I don't know where their degrees ended, but she was an excellent English teacher, and she and her husband are the ones that built this house.
This house?
This house. I did an art major. I didn't get far enough into it really to do anything with it, but I loved it. I had a good time at college. I made sort of good grades. Right. I met Roy in my sophomore year, and we very quickly knew that we had the same goals in mind. And so we married in August of 57, and it was a good year and a good thing to do. I had never given any thought to living in another country, never, except when Roy and I started talking, and then we thought, maybe this is something we might like to do and that we could do. Late 50s, right after the war, a number of missionaries went back to Europe. The Paydens went back to Italy because they had been soldiers there and they wanted to go back and teach people there. So there were two groups. We said we'd like to go as a team. And that's hard for people now to understand because most mission work now is done by teams. But back then it was not. And we were criticized because we were taking too many people to one place. Why couldn't we spread out and go other places?
All married couples?
Eventually, yeah. There were some of us that married, and then the ones that were single decided, yeah. And so they came later married. I assumed that we were green enough behind the ears that we just could do it and find a way to do it later. But there were two groups at ACC at that time. One group was deciding to go to Brazil, and our group was just meeting together once a week, because I remember Monday nights were the nights we'd meet. And we just talked about how we wanted to do. We'd studied the Bible together. We'd just do all kinds of things. And then we finally said we need to decide where we might go and start focusing on that area. And so I would say this was in 1959 or maybe 59, because Matt was born in 59, January, and I remember him being an infant when all of this was going on. I was working and Roy was working. We were not in class. We were just working, He was working at a feed company, and I was working wherever I could find a job. And then Matt came along, and that was the end of that. So the end of my work. But we decided we needed to make a decision about where we would go. Well, we were not as acquainted with the world as you would be today. We didn't hear the world news like we hear this day and age. And so we did not know a lot about what we were looking at. But we just started naming countries of the world that we knew about. And I remember putting all those country names up on a blackboard then. And we put up, it was full of names, and some we were familiar with, some we weren't. And so we said, okay, let's just take a look at these. And we did not campaign about any one particular place. We just said, these are the countries that we are knowledgeable of that probably would be a good place to take the gospel. And then we had a long prayer. I remember that. And then all the men wore hats back then, not baseball caps, but hats. And so we had a hat in there, somebody's hat. And we took that hat, we took a piece of paper and a pencil and wrote down the country we felt called upon we felt like was what we'd be interested in. And here again, another thing that we're so used to these days are the Lord has called us someplace, or God has called us to. That was not common language at that time. And And so we talked about all these countries, and then we put our choice down, and I remember opening up each piece of paper, and somebody said Vienna, 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 Hong Kong, Vienna, Vienna. Everybody was Vienna except one. And we had not campaigned for Vienna. And we said, okay, who wants to go to Hong Kong? And Gwen Hensley, bless his sweetheart, he said, well, I wanted to put down Vienna, but I couldn't remember how to spell it. But I knew how to spell Hong Kong, so he put Hong Kong down. But we all ended up going to Vienna as a team, went together in 61 in the fall. Some went earlier. We went in September. We went 1 month after the Berlin Wall and after the Iron Curtain was identified. I can imagine, and Vienna was just 30 miles from the Iron Curtain. I can imagine my parents knowing their 23-year-old daughter was going into that part of the world with their 2-year-old grandson. And I think we really believed that this was the thing to do. We felt like we could do some good with what was going on then. And so Roy and Lynn Camp, we kind of divided up the responsibilities, and Roy and Lynn took on printing. The church in, I believe, Tulia, Texas, gave us an A.B. Dick press, and we had it shipped over. And Roy and Lynn printed the Book of John. They printed all different kinds of things in the Slavic languages and in Russian, and would have people translate it, would have to check it, went through all of this. They would print it, and then we literally smuggled a lot of those things behind the Iron Curtain. Vienna had the choice after the war ended to divide itself like Berlin did into the Russian, the American, I'm not sure, the 4 sections. And they had that choice. Whoever the people that made those kinds of choices. And they said, let's not do that in Vienna. Let's do it in Berlin, but we're not going to do it here. And so there was the Russian where the Russians had been. They had been there, but when that all dissolved, then that was all gone. And so there was a Russian sector at one time, and the American sector and all of those, just like Berlin, only that was demolished. And so it was just a country on its own, Many of the Christians were, one of our friends, Brother Burke, Ruda Burke, we got well acquainted with, had been in had been in Mauthausen concentration camp, and told us all about that and his experience there. And that's a whole story that would be another book another time. A lot of them, Brother Berner had lost a leg, and he had laid under dead soldiers, when they were going through, and they all thought he was dead. So he laid there with his leg bent back, and of course ended up losing his leg. But he was the one that literally walked 20 miles to check us when we had our camp 20 miles out in the country at Riedeberg. He walked out there on his crutch to check and make sure we were okay. People like that had seen it all. And 15 years to them was like yesterday. You think about 15 years ago in your life. And the countryside, you would still, as you would drive through, you could see where fields had been bombed, Of course, all that kind of levels out after time, but all of that, and even in Vienna, especially in the Russian part, because the Russians thought if you took a commode out of a bathroom, they could take it back to Russia and it would flush, and they could use it like they did the same thing with telephones. They had never been exposed to anything like that. So that part of Vienna was pretty torn up physically. It was dark. The buildings were black and gray. Well, I didn't know how to speak German so Barbara said, okay, I'm going to teach you a word. I learned a little, but not enough to do anything. And so we were living with Barbara and Lynn Camp. You've heard their names over and over. And she said, you go down to the meat market. We had a meat store, we had a paper store, we had a milk store, we had they were not all in one, they were all individuals. And so she said, go down to the meat store and buy some ground meat. And so I went down and I said, and she taught me the word "fashirtas." So I practiced all the way walking down, "fashirtas, fashirtas, fashirtas." I got down in there and I said, "fashirtas." And they said, whatever they said. They asked me if it was pork or meat or beef and that's when I said, I did not know the word for cow or beef. So I said, moo. And they got me the meat that I wanted. Oh, me. But then later on, my young Matt, who was 2 when we got there, he would go places with me to translate for his mother. Yeah.
How did you, as a lady, as a girl, as a mom, how did you change?
Well, I had 2 of my babies there. I found out about all kinds of things about hospitals there, about when you go to the hospital, you need to know how to speak the language better than I did. There are needs, But no, I did have Vance and Carl in Vienna. They had dual citizenship, I guess, until they voted or did something that, defined that. I think having been raised the way I was and learning how to can and learning how to do things that a lot of city girls don't know how to do, I did very well, and I guess pride. I don't know if it's pride or if it's just I felt good about what I could do. Of confident, that's a better word, and so that served me well. Except for one time I thought I could freeze spinach. They had such good spinach, and so I went down and bought a huge batch of spinach, and I sat on the side of the tub, and I don't know why I thought I had to stem it, but I spent a day washing and stemming that spinach, and I was so tired at night that I could not continue. And so that spinach sat there overnight, and by the next day, it had to be tossed. And I'm talking about a big European tub full of spinach. So, but anyway, we did take a freezer. We had a freezer brought over or shipped over, and we kept a lot of food. There was no canned vegetables. Only one company had canned foods. And so we lived in apartments for a while, and then we moved out to Petrelsdorf. We were supported by a church in Kermit, Texas, and we were, I would just say we were barely supported. Our expenses were, we traveled. I traveled with Roy to Poland. We went through Prague, and we had to go through Berlin and through the checkpoints. Here's another story that is just unreal. How they examined your car, what they did. We went through at night, got off on the wrong road, and we got stopped by the guy that had the machine gun, and
That's behind the curtain.
yeah,
You're now.
we're back. We're in communist country now.
Do you have Bibles with you?
Yes, we had them in the bottom of the trunk. We covered them. We didn't hide them. They just were at the bottom of the trunk, and then we put all kinds of things on top. We also took carbon paper and typing paper, because at that time they were reading the Bible in the western part of the world in Europe that was being broadcast into the eastern part. They would read the Bible at dictator speed, and they were allowed by law to have an original and 4 copies. So we would take typing paper and carbon paper. So we had a lot of that. We put the Bibles in the bottom. We put the carbon paper and the typing paper. We put our clothes. And I think on top we put lemons, because they could not get lemons. And I remember having lemons. We took some Bic ballpoint pens, and that got us through one of the crossings, border crossings. because the guard just he'd click it and he'd put it back in his pocket. And he'd just click it and he'd just grin and put it back in his pocket. He'd take it out. That was all new.
Were y'all just these innocent young 20-somethings, and could they tell? Or I don't even know.
We had our passports, and they were amazed that we had children,
With you?
No, not with us on that trip. Not going into
Yeah.
Poland. No, they stayed with the camps.
The camps, like
The
Barbara?
Barbara and Lynn camp. Uh-huh. Okay, so we went into Poland, and we just knew where to go to the people there. I don't know how no GPS. I don't know. I just remember we borrowed a car because ours was not roadworthy, and we borrowed a red Saab or something. It was an ordinary car there, but it was so out of the. I mean, no one had cars at that time behind the Iron Curtain. Nobody. We had carts, and we had to pass and be careful at night because the carts and the horses or the oxen or whatever pulling the carts would be just out in the road, So,
Could you tell a difference in the populace?
oh yeah, their food rations were so low, but they wanted to feed us every place we stopped, and so you would try not to eat, but they would put out everything they had maybe for a week, and you had to eat. So I remember eating 5 meals in one day, and toward the end of the day, I thought, I hope I don't have to eat another meal tonight. And we did, but you just did it. We stayed in their home, and so as we got there that evening, up in Sopot is where we were. When we got there that evening, they took us into a small, I'd say a study. It had a shelf. It had a cut glass bowl that had letters in it. That was just how they were keeping things. And then there was a chair, not as wide as a love seat, but a chair in there that turned into our bed for that night. But as evening came, after we'd eaten another meal, they brought out some cans and some boards, and they put cans out in these boards, and we had seats for people to come in. They came in and sat down. We had a worship, but they didn't come in all at once. They came in a few at a time, and they would lead a few at a time because they did not want to attract attention. But the people we stayed with said, don't worry about it. So the police came this morning to let us know, because you have to register and tell where you're going to be going. They came and told us, to let us know that they knew that we were coming. And so we stayed there that night, and the next morning, as we were leaving, the lady handed me a gift, and that gift was that cut glass bowl that had the letters in it. And it is really my treasure of all. If the house were to burn, I would go, and it's up here in the shelf. It's really one of my treasures because it was a gift from the heart. And I mentioned it to someone. They said, well, they don't go buy a gift. They give you something that they love. And so I learned a lot of lessons when I was in my 20s that have stayed with me. Bibles were not the ordinary in the Eastern Europe countries. Very few people had one. So I'm going to tell you a story about Brother Martos in Budapest. And Lynn Camp, you hear me talking about Lynn and Barbara because they're so much a part of my life. And this is the story Lynn tells, but I knew Brother Martos, and his wife would always send me little gifts every time he would come. He worked with a bank in Budapest, in Hungary. And so when he was allowed to come to Vienna on business once or twice a year, I think just once a year, and he was a very high up in the business. And so when he would come, we would meet with him, and found out that he was meeting with a group of brethren in Budapest that just, here's the Bible, let's do what it tells us, this is it, and those are the people that we connected with over there. So we'd go pick him up at the train station. Well, Lynn Camp went and picked him up at the train station, and his countenance was very down. It was not his normal. He was always very up and excited to be there. He could never bring his wife because they would not let the two of them leave the country together. But he always came. And so Lynn said, well, you don't seem yourself. What's happened? And he said, well, I was on the train, and he said, I've never been bothered by the guards because of my position. But he said they came through as they stopped at the border and opened my briefcase for the first time ever. And he said my Bible, which was a rare thing, was sitting right on top. And he said they took it and they said, what is a man of your position doing with garbage like this? And it was in the summertime, and the window was down, and they threw it out the window. He said it has all my studies. It has so many things in it that are so dear to me. And he said it's just like I've lost my best friend. And so 2 years pass, and Lynn picks up Brother Martosh at the same train station. He was all himself again. And he said, Lynn, I've got to tell you, he said, 2 weeks ago, I got this package in the mail. And in the package was my Bible. And in the Bible was a note that said, we are so sorry to have kept this for so long. But that said, our children found this book as they were playing by the railroad track. They knew it was something special, and so they took it to their grandmother, and she said, yes, I know what that is. And so they said, we're sorry we've taken so long, but it's taken us 2 years to hand copy it. They had copied the entire Bible by hand, and 30 families had done that. When we take what we have so for granted, that story needs to come to our minds. So he had his precious Bible back, but 30 families, because those guards thought it was garbage, threw it out the window. Children picked it up, took it to their grandmother, and 30 families enjoyed fellowship together because of that.
You brought over printing equipment?
Yes. And that has, this Gwen Hensley that was going to go to Hong Kong took that when Roy and I left and went to we moved from there to Northern Ireland.
Oh, this is later?
Yes, he took that. After we left, somebody had to take the responsibility of it. Gwen took it. A man in Florida said, that's not big enough. He said, here's a Heidelberg printing press. That's the biggest. We didn't even have a place to put it. And I think it stayed in the box for a couple of years. Of course, we were already in Northern Ireland by this time, but it stayed in a box a couple of years before they found a building to put it in. But that has become, they translated and printed millions of Bibles that were sent behind the Iron Curtain. And that has ended up being the Eastern European missions, and that's EEM. And they are still doing that to this day, only rather than printing in Vienna, all of these free countries now can print their own. Pat Boone, yeah. He was performing in Vienna, and he wanted to meet with the Christians there. And so our time for meeting did not coincide with his time for being able to come. And so we'll just hang around and we'll have a short worship with you and have communion. And so we all stayed around. Of course, Pat Boone's coming. Pat Boone's this. Well, Matt was, I'd say, 5, maybe 6. And his little friend Diane they were out there playing, and somebody said Pat Boone's, had arrived, and Diane came running in. Pat Boone's here, Pat Boone's here, Pat Boone's here. And she said, who's Pat Boone? But he came and worshiped with us and went on his way. But he wanted to do that, and I thought that was that was good for us. Yeah, this is same time period. And so Roy found this place with the help of a monk. We found this place about less than a mile from the Czech border, and it was a farmhouse. I have pictures of it. I'll show it to you. And so we'd take our kids out there for a couple of weeks. We always had to build a toilet. In fact, we had pretty nice toilets out there.
Better than what you had when you were a little girl.
Better. I learned. We had the boys slept in the hay barn because all the barns are connected. It was like the house was 300 years old. The barn was connected to the house because you didn't have to go out in the winter that way. So the boys slept in the hay and the girls slept on the floor in the house. But we were instructed, do not go down the road a certain direction because that's the Czech border, and there's mines that have been laid in the and so watch for that. But we'd go to bed at night and we could hear the gunfire there. I guess it was maneuvers. I don't know if they were practicing or if they were killing people, but we could hear the machine gun firing almost all night. You heard the guns. So we were that close to that.
When you're a missionary, how do you measure success?
I think that you really don't know at that time. You feel like you're doing a lot of teaching and a lot of work, and sometimes you see very little results at that time. And yet, here again, right now, the church I go to here in Abilene is supporting a man in Vienna, Austria, who is the grandson of our dear friends there. And now he is the minister there. He's the preacher and is working with the refugees. And I've been over and been with him and doing all of that. And I knew his grandparents and his mother and dad, and now he's a little kid, and now he's in his 40s or 50s, I guess, but sometimes you don't know till you can look back and see, we did some good. We planted some seeds. Somebody else may have done the watering. Somebody else may have done some of the other work, but it eventually comes together. And that church stayed with us all the time we were there. In fact, they were the ones that said, would you like to move to Northern Ireland? I can't remember how they got interested in that work. And that was at the point that Matt was at the age of either taking the 11 plus test in Austria and either going to that was Ireland. He was at a good point of changing schools, I'll put it that way. And so we said, okay, let's do that.
Was this just you and Roy and the kids, or was there other? Because
No,
you had other people this whole.
Everybody kind of did. We worked as a team, and yet everybody had their own. We were individually supported, individual expectations, I guess you might say. And then we all just kind of made our own choices. One couple left earlier. Another couple moved to Graz. We decided to move to Northern Ireland. Yeah. Roy was invited to do a meeting, a gospel meeting there. And he got acquainted with the people, and they said, we'd love for you to come. And I believe this is the way that happened. Goodness, it's all kind of blurry when I think about it. But we ended up moving directly from Vienna to Northern Ireland. Coleraine, Coleraine. And they had started, I think they had the foundation of the church building, that they had acquired the land. They had the building started, and Roy was handy with all that kind of thing. And so we bought a little house behind the building, very close to the building, and I did all the cooking for everybody that worked on the building. And my kitchen had a sink in it. It had a kind of a little stove and some burners, I know that. It didn't have any cabinets, so we just put some boards and some bricks, and that was my cabinet. But the kitchen itself, I could reach both walls this way and then both walls this way. It was very small. It was a row house. It was the end of what do they call it? Goodness. Anyway, a row house. It was the very end one, right next to the railroad track. And so our bedroom was feet from the railroad track. And they go by every hour. Even today, but I'm very grateful for them because that same track runs by my house in Castle Rock. But I cooked, and we had volunteer workers, and they would come up and work, and Roy and Charlie and Danny worked all week, and then the guys would come up when they could, and we built the building. The first night I was there, from Austria to Northern Ireland, and the church had gathered over in Limavady for a party at the Roos house. Mel and Margaret Rue. And so I just had not, well, I was just brand new. And so Sammy Sterling was there, who now goes to the church in Coleraine still. He was there, and I guess we didn't have a car then. And so I came up to him and I said, "Can I bum a ride home?" Okay, you might you might not want to put this in there. Bum was referring to your bottom. Ride was referring to sexual activities. So I put all of my eggs in one basket and asked if I could bum a ride home. And then his answer was even better. He said, "Where's your kiss?" He was talking about my suitcase. But it was one of the best stories of a common language that was not at all common. So I get kind of turned red when I think about it now, but I don't think he remembers, and I don't think I'll ever tell him. No. But I see him when I go over. He and Daddy are still there. Well, to me, it was such a relief to be there, mainly because of the language. Of course, we are divided from that country by our language also. But they spoke English to a degree. And I had felt inadequate in Austria because I felt like I could do certain things in Austria. I could buy groceries, I could talk, but I always felt like I was on a first grade level in my conversations in German. And that affected me, just my confidence. I just did not. And so when I talked to the people in Ireland, I knew I could talk my heart language. I knew I could talk from the heart. I knew I could teach better. I could do things better because of the language, even though I spoke Texan and they spoke Northern Irish. But that was a real relief to me. And I felt also like I could use my talent in cooking. And the reason they had me doing that was they didn't want my kids around that church building. I think the boys are like this. All the kids, of course, we mentioned this earlier at our table, they all had lice. I mean, that was just part of living there. And my kids would come home from school every day, and I would look through their hair and pull out the lice and whatever needed to happen. But Charlie St. John had this cap, this Irish cap that he always wore. Well, the Doherty kids always loved grabbing his hat and putting it on their heads and running around. And so he'd take a newspaper, roll it up, and burn it, set it on fire, and he'd burn the inside of his hat out. So that was kind of a funny thing to witness so often, delousing the hats. The kids stayed around my house a lot. My best friend had, well, no, one of my best friends had a Doherty, birthed 17 children, and she raised 2 of her grandchildren. So 19 children in all, in about a 2-bedroom place.
And that was the smallest family, I understand.
Yeah.
Tell me about the 3 families.
Well, they had 22 kids each, so 66 kids out in this other place. Yeah. But like I said, the government paid such good welfare that the men had rather have kids than work. And so they just stayed drunk, and Etta he knew he had to hand over a lot of his money to her when he got paid, the dole, as they called it, because he knew he'd drink it all. But he would get drunk, and he got drunk one night and broke his leg, and she didn't think it was broken because she had seen him in that condition so long. And he said, "I need help to get upstairs." And she said, "I'm not going to help you up." So he dragged himself upstairs, and sure enough, his leg was broken. But she would come over, and Etta Doherty was my friend. She would come over and just visit and talk. And
what do you think the Northern Irish people thought of you crazy Texans?
I don't know.
I just, you can't help but wonder.
I know. I think they were glad to have some bodies there to help do the work. And I'll insert this. The building itself is smallish, and it's plain. It's not elaborate or anything. But we did have the front door, the door into the building. It was designed with stained glass. The doors and the side panels were just so pretty, and it kind of gave us a little bit of, it gave us a little class, I guess you might say. Well, this last year, Easter Sunday morning, as we drove up to the building, we saw that one of those panels had been broken. Nothing had been taken or anything. They hadn't gotten into the building, but that was just probably vandalism, which happened often to Protestant churches or to anyway. That was part of the living there, and so I picked up the pieces and brought it home, and I'm taking a box back to put some candles in that has some of that broken glass in it. That I am planning to hand carry it, and I have a little welcome sign that will go in front of it. This is the fish. Let's say it's called an ectish. I'm not sure that. Don't quote me on that. But the gold part is the glass that was broken that Sunday morning, and this purple is some that was broken out at another time. And so my sister gave me a mirror to put in the bottom, and my friends helped me put this together. In fact, I helped them. I'll put it that way. With this design, it's kind of reminds me of fish. It reminds me of waves. It reminds me of all kinds of things. And the sweet, sweet person that helped the most was Olivia de Armand, I guess, Armond, Armand? Armand. Sorry, Olivia. And when we finished with it, I said, it has to be called something. We just can't just leave it that way. So Janine McMahon, who helped also and furnished a lot of the materials, I said, broken to beauty, broken to something. And she said, broken to reborn. And so something that was broken and so shattered is still something beautiful. And when I take it back, I will have a little sign that says welcome. And we'll have an arrangement of flowers back here. And that as you walk in that door, this will be the first thing you see. And I hope that it will welcome many people. And I'm going to have a hard time leaving it there because I really do like it. Yeah, I'll go back next year. But Olivia also made me a sun catcher of some of the pieces, so I have it to keep at my house. But I think it's a beautiful piece, and I know they'll treasure it. And so that's such a great. I mean, you put your broken spirit in the hands of the right Savior, and you can turn out to be almost anything you want to be. There is a culture in Ireland. There's another book over there that's called about the gypsies, but that's just part of the culture. And they went around in these covered, what are they called? The wagons that they take, horse-drawn wagons that they live in. And then they'll come into the community, and I know that they do some work. I think they're tinkers. They do, repair pans and all kinds of things. And you'll see them out in the country, and they'll have their laundry draped over the hedges to dry. But I had one of the girls that would come by and knock on my door, when they came into town, she'd always come. And I would usually give her food. I remember giving her some boots one time because I thought she needed them. I was scrubbing on my hands and knees a long rug, and she came by, and I said, "Well, would you help me scrub my rug here?" And she said, "Oh no, I won't do that." So she wanted things, but she didn't want any, and she wouldn't want to have to do any work. But that was their culture. I mean, they were really serious gypsies, and you've seen the gypsy weddings, you've seen the gypsy families, if you've ever. In Northern Ireland, we had Camp Shamrock, and it is still going on today. And I have made an appeal for my church here to send several $1,000s back with me. I'm hoping that'll happen. It started in '65 when I was there, and here again I was one of the cooks, and then I was a counselor for the girls, and that usually we had the boys' camp and the girls' camp, and I stayed for both because I was the cook, and so that was the first summer, and it has gone on ever since. And the government, because of the work Bert has done, the minister there, Bert Ritchie, Bert and Doreen have done with peacekeeping. The government has said, and the whole purpose of the camp, it's not the typical church camp, not the typical Bible camp. Bert's and their idea was to put Catholic kids and Protestant kids together to learn to love each other and have fun together. Just be kids out in a beautiful area, and it has gone on all these years. Well, the government has been subsidizing it quite a bit, and this last year they put so many strings attached that Bert says we cannot do these things. We cannot promote these things. You just take it wherever you want to go. And so Bert says, thank you, but we'll manage with that. And so I'm trying to raise some funds. I'm a good fundraiser.
I bet you are.
Trying to raise some funds to make up for a little of that. And the shamrock itself, that is the symbol, national symbol, is only 3 leaves, because St. Patrick and the other, it is a symbolic of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. I love this place. I do. And I am every morning grateful for the health I have. I mean, I've had breast cancer, 30 years survivor of that, so I'm glad for that to be behind me. But I would go there to live if I weren't 86, and if bodies would stay the way they are from now on. But I know their medical system, and I think it would not be wise. And so I just thank the Lord that He allows me. And I always stay just a little bit longer the next year. I think last year it was 3 months. This year it's 3.5. I would stay longer, but it's kind of hard to stay away from your house and your obligations and your water, all kinds of things happening at your house that you need to stay on top of.
May I ask, what is the attraction? Because you could go anywhere. What is it about it?
I think my feelings for the people. I mean, the country is absolutely incredibly beautiful. I'm within just a 3-minute walk down to the water's edge. I love watching the waves come in. As they say, the waves are the heartbeat of Ireland. You just feel that there's something about water. Don't like to swim in it, but I feel like that's where I belong, and I don't know. I can't even tell you why I feel that way. I feel like in a small church like that my being there matters, and not that I have to matter any place, but I go over here to a lovely place over here that has several hundred people. I'm there or I'm not. It doesn't make any difference. When I'm there, I feel much a part of that group. I also feel a part of that community because Bert does a lot of community work, and every time it's appropriate for me to go, when it's something I can go to, he calls and says, can I come pick you up? And he'll come. We've been to Protestant parades. There's a whole story behind that. I've gotten acquainted with the police there in Coleraine because he is acquainted with them, and he's important to their. I've been to some of their exhibitions there in the city hall, and I've met the mayor. I've been to all kinds of. I go to their church forum gatherings and the interfaith gatherings. I have the women over to my house for Bible studies or just for fun and laughing and having a cup of tea. Bert, this year I'm going to have the women from outside the church. There's a group there that I'm going to have over, and I know all the people in all the shops in my little village. In my tiny village, there's a tiny grocery store, a bakery, a candle store, a gift shop, a pharmacist, a butcher. I go down to the butcher store, and I mean, it's just a butcher shop, and we chat, you know. And people there, I know all their names. They know my name. I can't walk down the street without having to stop and talk to people in there as they're getting the weeds out of their garden. I had the lady across the street that I was telling you about being a very famous artist and designer wrote me the other day, and she says, "When are you coming home?" And I thought, thank you. I love that. I love that. I feel very much at home there.
My name is Bert Ritchie. I'm minister for the Sweet Congregation here in the north of Ireland in County Derry. I know Mariana was going to share some news about her trip to Ireland, and I asked her for permission. Could I just take a couple of minutes to say a few things, because I know Mariana will not say the things that I'm going to say here out of her humility. So I want to take just a couple of minutes here and give you an idea of Mariana's help. Mariana set foot in this building, many years ago before I ever became a Christian. She came here as a young mother, and when they were constructing this place, she was up on the roof putting bricks together, feeding a workforce, and doing it diligently. In the providential world that we live in, the full cycle of Mariana's life, she came back to be with us. No longer building bricks and roofs, but uplifting and building in the hearts of people. And that's what I want to share with you. I don't get involved in too much in debates and conversations about things like women's role in the church. All I can say about Mariana is, to me personally, she has been a wonderful spiritual helpmeet, matriarchal inner influence to the church. She goes where I go. She does what I do, and is a powerful influence in our community. Take just a minute here and walk with me through a wee short journey, and I'll share with you some of the things that Mariana is involved in. Thank you. I want to say that Mariana is very much a part of our family. In fact, I'm the blow-in in this relationship, as my wife Doreen had been engaged to Mariana's son Vance. That didn't go much further. But I let Mariana tell the rest of that story. But certainly one of the blessings in marrying Doreen is that I got to know Mariana, a bond that grows deeper as we age. And we've been especially thankful for her being one of our grandchildren's adopted great-grandmother to Matthew, child with 100 questions a minute. And if there was nothing else we are indebted to her for, it's for her patience in mentoring Matthew. That gratitude is also felt in our church family. This was a congregation which seeded many years ago when she and her family were church planting in Ireland. We do church in the building on Sunday, and we live church the rest of the week. That's what I meant when I said Mariana partners in all I do and where I go during her time in Ireland. I call her my living tract. Over the years, I've hand-delivered many printed tracts about our faith, often trashed and often refused. But Mariana's a magnet to people, not only in the village where she lives, but never meeting a stranger, only people with whom she develops an acquaintance, irrespective of color, creed, gender, or religion. A walking witness. Mariana's participation in our outreaches, such as the Multicultural Forum and Faith Forum, contributes a positive momentum in our ministry of reconciliation. She walks the street with me in my role as a mediator in situations of potential conflict between Protestant and Catholic parades. Sometimes it's suspect, but always released on bail. That's a bit of humor for those who may have lost it along the journey. Thank you, Mariana, for sharing in our annual commemoration for those who have lost their lives in our shameful past. We rotate churches each June in repentance and memory. I think one of our favorite moments is with the wee family of challenged residents in our care centers, singing the songs we sang at Sunday school and having fun. It really is an oasis of peace away from our complicated world. Mariana was one of the founding members of a church camp Shamrock when she lived in Ireland, and way back in the day. Fast forward to this year, and it was an honor to have her as a guest at our meeting of the camp, which in fact is still operating and indeed is one of the most successful outreaches. So we're thankful for all she does, cleaning the church building, and mentoring our interns, engaging with our politicians, having an open house, respecting the faithful, who were an integral part of the church. Mariana, thank you for your matriarchal role and example, and not least for the crack, and reminding us that having fun and the celebration of life has no boundaries. And finally, thank you to those who support Mariana in any way, and her blessing of us.
We moved to Amarillo for a while, and the thing that we did there was a 30-minute children's TV program. And the way that came about was Roy and I had this vision of doing it. We went to the elders, and they said, we don't have money for that kind of thing. We went to the TV station anyway, and we said, we'd like to do this, but we don't have any money. We told him what we'd like to do, how we'd like to do it. And he said, well, that sounds like something I wish my children could watch. And he said, after some consideration, he got back with us and he said, we're going to give you the space, the studio. We're going to give you the time for production. And we said, but we don't have any money. He said, we're going to give you the time on the air time. And so we said, okay, we'll do this. And he said, we'll do it. And we'll have kind of a pilot film, and we're going to see how it goes. And then we'll decide whether we're going to do it or not. There was only one segment that he did not especially like. So I created another idea for that. And it was amazing. It was called All the King's Children. It aired every Sunday morning at 8:00. People from all the area of, just around in Amarillo. We got letters all the time. We got people, tuning into it. We always had a Bible, a theme. And the part that we invented to take the space of when Roy just told a Bible story, I made a puppet in the form of a snake, only the worm. It was a bookworm, and so he lived in a house that was a bookworm house, and there was a big worm book on top, and there was a hole that he would come out, and there was always a word that would come out, and this was the big word for the day, and it might be a beatitude. His name was Bartholomew the Bookworm, and so we would have a lesson about Beatitudes that day, and all the segments would have just all kinds of segments that talked about Beatitudes, or we'd tell this, but he could, and then we always had a guest, about a 6 or 7 year old guest that sat on a stool. Roy was out here, this guest was out here, and I was the bookworm, and one of our guests that was 6 years old is now our sports announcer here on our TV station. So I gave you your start, but it was very well done. And then when we left there to go to college, to go to Houston. It lasted for a year, I think. And then we moved from Amarillo to a church in Houston, the Bammel Church on 1960. And that's where I was hired as, they didn't want to use the word minister for women, but I was a coordinator of women's activities. But I taught ladies' classes all week long at the building and in the community. And that was really a great time for my own spiritual growth as far as knowledge more. And the more you teach, the more you have to learn. Well, I used to go on Thursdays, I would go down to Herman Medical Center, a children's hospital, and take my puppets and do a puppet thing for the kids every Thursday.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Sally, this is Chance. Yeah, he said, yeah. You can talk out loud. Chance, you're pretty good looking, you know? Yeah.
So I got to learn a little bit about you, Sally. In the early 80s, it looks like you guys were very busy.
Yes, we used to go to Herman Hospital and visit with the kids there. Some of them were very, very sick, but they loved when I would come visit.
You'll never guess where I was born.
Where?
Herman Hospital.
Oh, that's right. How about that, Sally? Herman Hospital. That's right. That's where we used to go that's where we would go with Rick Smith, remember? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what would you guys do, Sally?
We would read stories, we'd talk to the kids, we would, we would play games. Yeah, and they loved me and I loved them. Yes.
Do you miss it?
I do.
All those little kids are grown up now.
Oh.
And you're 50.
And I'm 50. It's okay. It's all right to be 50. I got to be 50 at one time, but it's been a long time ago, yeah. Okay.
Bye, Sally.
Bye. We're glad you came. Thank you, and hope you come to see us again. And so that was a whole day traveling down there, getting in the car and coming back. And so Roy and I were talking about we'd been invited to Burlington, Massachusetts to preach, and we'd been invited to Summit County, Colorado, and both places kind of appealed to us. And so coming back from Herman Hospital one day, I was waiting in the traffic as always, and this big long train, cars passed in front and over me, and they said, Frisco, Frisco, Burlington, Frisco. And I got home and I said, I know where we're supposed to go. In jest. I said, we're going to Frisco because there were more Frisco cars than Burlington, because that was what was printed on the side of the cars. Burlington Railroad and Frisco Railroad. It was not a serious sign to me, but I thought it was a good one. But we ended up in Frisco and lived in several different places in Summit County. Lived in the church building for a couple of years, in fact. And it's one of those things, and maybe it's almost like we knew we could do it, and not everybody can, and not everybody will. And I kind of think that's a lot of what is still in me. I know I can do this. I know I can. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it as long as the Lord will let me. So we worked with the church there, loved it, had many good memories there. And it was the summer of 95. I'd been invited to go to Russia with a group from Harding. And at Roy's serious encouragement, please, I'm your biggest fan, you know that I'm going to support you in this. And it was sort of something we had talked about doing together, but he said, I can't do it, but you can go, and I want you to go with my blessing, blah, blah, blah. So I went in 94 and stayed 6 weeks, and went back in January of 95, the beginning of 95, to take some supplies to a children's hospital there. And then I went back in 96 with this same group from Harding. And when I came back in 94 and 95. When I came back in 95 is when I found out why Roy was very encouraging for me to go. It gave him opportunity for outside work. I got back from Russia in 95 to see that it was my life was going to be changed, and not what I wanted, but not what I had a choice in. And for that reason, I said, okay, what next? You will remember the scripture when many people turned from Jesus, and Jesus looked at his disciples and says, so to whom shall you go? Or to where will you go? And they said, to whom shall we go? And that's pretty much, I mean, I don't remember ever being angry with God. I don't remember, now maybe I was, but I don't remember being angry about it. I just knew it was something that I had to deal with. My grandmother McGinty said one time when she lost she buried 4 of her 6 boys, or 5 of her 6 boys. I mean, I think there's only 1 left. I said, Grandmother, how did you do that? And she said, you do what you have to do. And I kind of think that has been ingrained in me enough that you do what you have to do, and you just do it. When Roy left, he left me nothing. He left, I think I had $90 in a jar. No, there was $90 in the bank account. I think it was in the jar in the bathroom. And there was a little bit in the bank account, but that had to go to pay our electric before it got cut off. He left me with nothing. I was scared. I felt very old, and I felt very ugly. I remember those 3 things very distinctly, because I thought, Vance and Willie said, you can come stay with us till we find out what we need to do. They were newlyweds, and so here I move in with newlyweds. I thought, if I can just kind of spend my time over in the corner, I'm not going to live long anyway, so I'll be out. I mean, I really did feel like I could just be invisible. And after a little while, I got a job at ACU, and I thought, I can live on $6.50 an hour for the rest of my life if I don't have anything happen. And so that's when I said, I've got to get to where I can make a better living. It was the same office, but I could not be advanced until I had a bachelor's degree. ACU gave me a discount, but not a big one. My mother was still living, and she said, I will help you with that. And so she helped me with the tuition. And so she did, and the next year ACU gave me a little more, and I gave a little more, and so, but I got my bachelor's. I think I was I 68 or no? I was maybe 60 when I got my bachelor's, and I was sitting there at my job. I was promoted then from secretary or administrative assistant, I think they're called now, to a major donor officer, which was a pretty nice step. And I loved what I did. I loved raising money. I loved visiting people who were donors, and I loved finding out what their life was like and what they needed. And then I got to tell them what ACU needed, and it was a great partnership. And I drove all over the country visiting people, and I loved it. And so by then, of course, I had my bachelor's, and I thought, I'm going to school. I'm sitting right here. Why don't I get my master's? And so that was weekends, night classes, noon classes. That was just, and full-time work, and going on come before winter missions every year, twice a year. It was interesting. I started in 55 at ACC when we were celebrating 50 years of existence. That was when they brought big techs from the state fair to our campus up here. Only time they ever brought him out. Anyway, they brought him up here. And so that's when I was a freshman, when we were 50 years old. When I got my master's, we were celebrating 100 years. So it took me 50 years from my very beginning to the end. And to my master's, and Vance says, well, when are you going to work on your doctorate? And I said, I've already been accepted at Tech Medical School. They're going to take my body and use it And so I've got my little card in my billfold. And when I die, I go to Tech Medical School. So my friend Christy Kate, my family knows Christy. She's kind of a part of the family. Came to my office at ACU. I was working there, and she put this piece of paper down on my desk, and she said, "You've got to buy this house." And I looked at it, and I thought, well, yeah, are you going to loan me the money? And but I noticed that it was built by Frank and Della Pack. I did not know they had first names for a long time, but Frank and Della Pack moved here from California, and in 58, 59, they built this house. And I thought, I remember that being built. I remember that it was kind of a big deal that they put 2 sinks in 1 bathroom. We were just getting used to bathrooms in the house almost. And what I understand, I don't know if it's true or not because I don't have the blueprints, but I've been told from people from California that just walked up to my front door and said, "Do you realize you're living in an Eichler house?" That's Eichler. And he was a student of Frank Lloyd Wright. And it has been modified, I'm sure, for Texas. But when you look at the Eichler map book, I've got one over there, you can see the similarities. And in California, there are sections of Eichler houses that are worth a bunch of money now. And it used to have just a carport, and I enclosed it with the garage. But they built this house. But he was a Bible teacher, and he was very, very hard. But I knew them both well. They actually came to Vienna and visited us when we were in Vienna, took us to the opera, and paid for our tickets. And they became more than just our teachers. They were also friends. And then they moved back out and finished their life at Pepperdine. And so they had an important part in my life. And at the time, I had no idea I would live in their house someday. I came and looked at the house and thought it would be an impossibility to buy it because I did not know my financial situation, and I just thought, this is scary. But as I walked in, I could see my piano right where it sits. I could see it, but my fear was that I would get it, and then how would I deal with it? And so it kind of ended up, the way I got it was determined by the curtains in the bedroom. Okay, imagine this house with pink carpet, ugly pink carpet, all the way back into the bedroom. The carpet was pink everywhere, and even in the bathrooms it was pink. Over that lovely tile back there. I didn't even know those tiles were there till I pulled up the carpet. Okay, so in the bedroom, she had shears over the windows that were almost a maroon. And so the air in that bedroom was pink. I mean, it was like walking into a bottle of Pepto-Bismol. And so I thought, I don't know about this, but I could see what could be done here. And but when we started negotiating, I said, I can't pay this price that you're asking. If we could get it down to whatever. And the final part of that was, if I can have the curtains out of the bedroom, you can have it for that price. The curtains were, I know it was they were very expensive draperies, dark green with big pink roses all over. I mean, they were nauseating. I said, well, okay, I can do that. And also I bought, there was a little storage shed out here. I bought it separate from the house. So I was able to get the house for a price I could handle. So it was a gift from God, absolutely. And he has provided well enough for me that I've been able to keep it and then do some, so. In California, this would all be glass.
Mm-hmm.
In Texas, you don't do that. So, this is
gorgeous, man.
This is what they have. And my house, as my granddaughter once said, it's a museum. And I thought,
Okay.
well, I love my museum then. Okay, my study here.
Oh,
I
nice.
took all these pictures except the one here in the middle. when I was in Africa once.
Right.
In
You're a bit of
Kenya.
a little photo bug, huh? A little
Uh,
bit. My gosh.
that would be my hobby if I were rich,
Yes.
but I love what I've been able to do.
You're
So
beautiful.
this is my nest. This is where I nest right here.
Ah, this is where you
And
hang
so,
out.
yeah, this
I
is
wonder
it
if-
right here.
Mm.
It's just my fountain corner. And Matt mentioned it or not, but I got a patent when I was 68 years old. I patented something that I invented.
What was it?
It was something for travel called a foot nest. And you take it on the plane and you just take it apart. And I'm not going to pull it all the way out, but you set it on the back of the seat in front of you. You put it up there and adjust it. And then you can rest your feet on this little padded section here. And you can get them off the floor where it can help alleviate deep vein thrombosis and just makes it more comfortable. And so I kind of do that kind of business back there, and I have my sewing machine back there. I sew, and I do have a bed back there. I've used it for a guest room at different times, but
So it's built all out.
yeah, it's all sheetrocked, and but all these rooms have an door to the outside, which I think is wonderful.
Unique.
This is a lovely place to be out when it's summer.
What is your relationship with Asani?
He was one of 22 Malagasy students that came to ACU from Madagascar. And when they got here, our vice president was over there and talked to the president of the country. Our vice president of the university spoke to the president of the country. Can't think of his name right now, but the president said, we'd like for you to come over and teach, send some of your teachers over here. And John Tyson said, we don't need to send teachers. You need to send students to us. Then they can come back. And so that arrangement was made, and they started out with hundreds of applicants and boiled it down to 22. Asani was the very last one, I think, to be chosen because he did not have a good handle on the language of English. But he got to come, and of 22 kids. And, of course, I was in the development office, and I called Vance one day, and I said, it's fall. These kids are all here, and they're all very small, but do you have some clothes that maybe, like coats and warm things? They don't have warm clothes. They're from Africa. So Vance said, well, what about just putting them load them up in your car and meet me at the sport good place. It starts
Academy.
with Academy. Thank you. And I said, okay. So Jet was smallish. He was in an infant seat. So I met Vance with Jet in tow, and I took about 5 students over there, and he said, okay, I'm giving you so much money. Find what you need, but make sure it's something you can be warm in, but prioritize what you get. And I think he bought clothes for all those kids in the beginning. And then that fall, that Thanksgiving, he invited them all out to their house out in the country for Thanksgiving dinner. And Asani was one of those, but Asani stuck. He just stuck. And he held, I remember him holding Jet when Jet was just months old. And he said, this is the first baby I've ever held in my life. And Asani has been a part of our family ever since. He is one of us. But he is, he got his bachelor's. Okay, he had the first semester, he had to do the language. He couldn't do anything but that. Second semester, he finished, second year. Between their second and third years, they were allowed to go back to Madagascar and visit family. And so Asani went back. His mother was ill, but he called her from Antananarivo and said, I can't come up today, but I think I can come after Monday. I'll be there because I've got to go to the consulate's office. But before he got up there, his mother died. And that, of course, was very traumatic. But he came back and finished his bachelor's in 3 years. He stayed and got his master's. And he is now a CPA, Midland, and is doing extremely well. But he joins us for any kind of holiday, anytime off he has. And then his dad came over and stayed a month with Vance and Willie out in the country, no place to go walking and see things, and spoke French only. Willie didn't speak French, but she would bring home John Wayne movies translated in French. And so he watched lots of John Wayne movies in French. But he was here, I think, a month.
Welcome to America.
Yeah. So Asana is really important to us. Yeah.
Come Before Winter. What is
Come
that?
Before Winter. It was in 2001. My friend Karen Alexander called me and she said, Mariana, would you be a part of a team that I'm taking to Greece? It's a group of, we're calling this program Come Before Winter. And it's from the writings of Paul when he wrote to Timothy and said, would you come visit me? He was in prison. He said, come before winter and bring my cloak and my parchments. And so what that was all about was to take a renewal, not a retreat, but a renewal to women all over the world who are either in ministry or missions. Some of them were in parachurches like medical mission, like a nurse, nurses are translators are, that were working in other areas.
Kind of service.
So I said, well, my first response to that was, but Karen, I'm divorced. And I felt, I don't know if it's unworthy. That's not it. I felt like I could not be a good ambassador for the Lord, I guess, in my state. And I think that's probably because of the time of I grew up in or grew older in. So she said, of course I know. She knew Roy and she knew she would weep over it with me, But she said, just go. And so I went to Greece, and the team is made up usually of 12, maybe not as big then, but 12 to 14 women. And we all have our area that we're responsible for. So you don't have to worry about travel plans. You don't have to worry about the curriculum. You don't have to, anyway. So they asked me to be in charge of the art in some of it. I was also responsible for documenting the whole renewal with my camera. I love photography and I'm pretty good at it. And so that was my part that I loved, besides being prayer partners and all kinds of other things. But those were my really main responsibilities. So from 2001 till I think 2016 was my last. I think I went on 32 different renewals all over the world. I've been to all the continents except Antarctica, and I'm not through yet. I may still go there. But it helped me to realize, well, the first time when I went to Greece after I had said I'm divorced, on Sunday, the preacher there said, could you take one more lady? It was for women in leadership positions. It was not just for all the women that wanted to come. And then we said, okay, we can. She was the wife of one of the ministers, and he said her husband just walked away from her last week. One of the ministers. Okay, God, I know, I hear you, And so she and I was there, if for no other reason. I went to Greece, and then I have a list of the places I've been with that particular group. One of the most, we did some also, we did what we call international training. There's a word for it. I can't, it's not coming to me at the moment. But we would go, like, we went to Mexico, and we trained a team there to do what we did in English. We never did do any of these renewals in other languages because you lose too much in translation and time and all. So women had to be able to speak English when they came. But we trained women in Mexico, and then they did their own renewal in their language and in their culture as we stood around the edge and helped and trained and coached and encouraged. So that we did that in Mexico and in Panama. So that was a real sweet thing. Being a mom, there are so many things, little bits and pieces I remember about when they were infants, little stories. I can see a lot of that in my mind, and yet a lot of it is so gone, which makes me very sad. But enough is there, and I'm so grateful I had those 3 boys. Well, I can't imagine having girls. I really never have wanted girls, so God answered that prayer. But I think I have been so honored by their lives is what I've, and when Matt said I need to stay with Gail, I thought absolutely, for him to come here and leave a wife who is in such pain from broken ribs, that would be so against what we've always done and felt and thought. So I'm really proud of who they are as fathers, and and that makes me feel like maybe I didn't do such a bad job as a mother. There are a lot of things that I'd like to undo and do again. And I still refer to them as the boys, even though they're 65 and 60 and, well, almost, yeah, is Vance 61? Yeah, I guess he is. He was born in 63. And Carl will be 60 this April. They're still the boys, and they always will be. And in so many ways, they still are my boys. But I am so proud of what they've done with their lives. And they're not finished. There are a lot of things that we all need to change, but I'm right in that line of that. So I have 2 granddaughters and 2 grandsons, 4. And they're all still single, so no great-grandchildren, thank goodness.
Although
We need to do that in the right order. My granddaughter Avery will visit me in Northern Ireland this summer. Of course, Vance has brought his family, so and Avery's been there before with her dad. So they all know why I love it, and I rent the same house every year, so I know exactly where I'm going and what utensils are in the drawers. I know the whole. I think I retired at 75. I can't remember what age I was, but the reason I remember one of my trips, I put over 3,000 miles on my car. I went from here through New Mexico and up through Utah and Colorado and back here. Most of my travel was done in Texas, but it was Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin. And at some point in time, I hated dealing with that traffic. I didn't mind dealing with the traffic, but to have an appointment at 2:00 in Houston, and I always honored my time with people. That's when I said, I don't need to be doing this anymore. But I'm glad I was in it. I loved it. I did a great job. Um, I don't know how much, but it was not a small amount that I raised for them. And I look back on that with great pleasure that made a difference. Of course, I was traveling with Come Before Winter. And then when I started feeling like I needed to turn my part over to younger women, we were all trying to do that. We're trying to pass the baton on to the next generation. And I thought, what I would like to do with my time now is to go back to Northern Ireland and to experience that again. I did not know where it would lead when I went back in 2014. I went back with Willie, Connie, or Vance's wife, and with Rush to Vienna, as Rush performed with the Chorus Abilene there. And after we left there, we went to Prague. And so I said, if y'all are going to Vienna, I'm going with you. And so I went with the group. And then when we finished Prague, we went to Northern Ireland. And Vance says, I don't want to travel with a bunch of kids, so I'll meet you in Northern Ireland. So he and Jet came to Northern Ireland. That was 2014. And so they stayed a week. I said, this is not long enough for me. So I stayed another few days and came back by myself. And it was then I said, I've got to do this next year again. So I went back and stayed a month, traveled from there to Scotland to help with a retreat. And then the next year I did the same thing. And then after that, I felt cheated because I gave a week to Scotland that I'd rather have been in Ireland. And so from then on, I kept stretching it. And then I don't know how long I've been going back for 3 years now, for 3 months now, for I'd say since 2018, 19. And of course, I didn't get to go in 20 because nobody was going anyplace. But I count this my 10th year to go back. And each year has been richer and richer. And they honor me by calling when they have a board meeting of the camp or something of that sort. They will ask my opinion or, get my thoughts. And so I feel like I'm still a part of all of that in a deeper way than just going and spending my time there. It's been a rich experience. Now, I think of Paul when he went back to Ephesus and to those places he had first gone to, and he went back the second and the third time. I think I know exactly what he was doing and how he felt when he went back there. When I go now and see the song leader that's standing up there that's 60-something years old, and I remember him when he was a little kid back in my class, it is just, it's like I said, you don't always see what you do when you're doing it. You don't see the results of it. You don't know that you're doing anything, but you can see it as the years pass. And how grateful I am that I've had enough years to see it. Some people don't get that privilege.
What would you tell your 17-year-old self, and what would you tell your 58-year-old self?
My 17-year-old self, I would say, Mariana, you may not be as pretty as your friends. You may not have the store-bought dresses. And you may not feel really good about a lot of things you are, but you're going to be okay. You're going to be all right. And those things don't really matter. But they did at the time. My 58-year-old self, I would say, you may be hurting really a lot now, but in 30 years, you're going to be feeling really good about your life. So enjoy life and just live it. It's the mailman.
Be like, well, you're not finished either.
I'm
So
not finished either. I may mess up real big between now. Well, I'll have to tell you that when I know that camera's not. There's another one. I think I'd be safe to tell you. That's not on now, is it? Is it on?
it's always.
I'm not going to say it.
All
until
right,
I'm
we'll
back
wait
in the
till it's
back,
really
okay?
not. We'll leave that out.
Yeah, take that out. Yeah, that's okay. What do you want to tell me? The show's over, huh? Well, that's okay, but you got in a little bit of it, so that's all right. You're okay with that. Even at the end of it, you're okay. Are you all right with that? Okay.